Hi everyone. Here in this presentation, we're going to be focusing on the functions of the large intestine. We have that the residue of chyme that enters the large intestine, it will contain few nutrients and water, as 90% of it gets absorbed in the small intestine, and the rest will be absorbed in the large intestine. Typically, it will take about 12 to 24 hours for this final residue to stay within the large intestine. The large intestine will absorb most of the remaining water in a process that will convert the liquid chyme residue into what we call a semi-solid feces. It can also be referred to as a stool. The feces will be composed of undigested food residue, unabsorbed digested substances, millions of bacteria. It will also be composed of old epithelial cells from the GI mucosa, inorganic salts, and enough water to let it pass smoothly out of the body. Therefore, it may not surprise you that the large intestine can be completely removed without significantly affecting the digestive function. For example, in severe cases of inflammatory bowel disease, the large intestine can be removed by a procedure that's known as colectomy, and often a new fecal pouch can be crafted from the small intestine and sutured all the way to the anus. It's not a pleasant procedure, but when necessary is one that will serve the patient in replacing the digestive functions that they need. In the large intestine, mechanical digestion will begin when chyme moves from the ileum into the cecum, an activity that is regulated by the ileocecal sphincter. Right after you eat, peristalsis in the ileum forces the chyme into the cecum. And when the cecum is distended with the chyme, then the contractions of the ileocecal sphincter will strengthen. And once the chyme enters the cecum, then the colon movements will begin. We can add that mechanical digestion in the large intestine will include a combination of 3 different types of movements. Movement of the ingestion materials from the cecum to the transverse colon occurs very slowly, and it involves both the peristaltic activity and the haustral churning, which are segmentation movements of the large intestine. Now, this slow passage of materials along the large intestine allows time for the chyme to be converted into a very mushy paste, and movement of the transverse colon through the rest of the large intestine will result from this powerful peristaltic contraction that's called mass movements that occur actually a few times a day. And the stimulus is going to be distension of the stomach and the duodenum, and the commands are going to be relayed over the intestinal nerve plexus. And this is why this process of creating mass movement is called the gastrocolic reflex, because it starts at the stomach and it ends at the colon. Therefore, the contractions will force the fecal materials into the rectum and produce this conscious urge to defecate. In other words, the distension of the stomach wall and the duodenum wall is what causes the mass movement to occur starting at the transverse colon. Now, the rectal chamber is usually empty, except when one of those powerful mass movements forces the fecal materials out of the sigmoid colon into the rectum. In other words, the several mass movements that occur throughout the day are mainly depositing the fecal material in the sigmoid colon. And when you have enough fecal matter in this location, the next mass movement will send the fecal matter onto the rectum. And this will cause a distension of the rectal wall that will then stimulate the conscious urge to defecate. And this will also lead to the relaxation of the internal sphincter through what we call defecation reflex, and then the fecal material moves into the anal canal. Now, defecation will only occur when the external anal sphincter, which is voluntary, relaxes. However, keep in mind that the longer you hold the fecal matter inside of the large intestine, the harder it becomes, because one of the main functions of the large intestine is to absorb water. Therefore, the longer it stays, the harder your feces become. Also, there is only about 10% of water left to be absorbed in the large intestine, as most of it is going to be already absorbed by the small intestine. And this can lead to constipation. And this is why when you have diarrhea, it is really soft and watery because it stays very little time in the small and large intestines. It is sort of like a defense mechanism. Usually, when you have diarrhea, it is because you ate something that was bad for you, and because of this, your body wants to get rid of it as soon as possible. And it also does not want to absorb any of this bad food. Therefore, it pushes it out as fast as possible. And the large intestine and the small intestine do not have the time to absorb the water from this food content. And this is why diarrhea is watery. Makes sense, right? Well, remember, everything makes sense. In addition, you also have help from this process of defecation by a voluntary procedure that's called Valsalva's maneuver, in which you actually increase the intra-abdominal pressure by contracting the diaphragm together with the abdominal wall muscles and also closing your glottis. Yes, closing your vocal cords. Therefore, if you ever wonder why it's hard for you to talk while you're pooping, this is why, because of the Valsalva's maneuver. With regards to chemical digestion, we can say that although the glands of the large intestine secrete mucus, they don't secrete digestive enzymes. Therefore, the chemical digestion in the large intestine occurs exclusively because of the healthy bacteria that's present in the lumen of the colon. Through a process that's called saccharolytic fermentation, the bacteria will break down some of the remaining carbohydrates, and this will result in the discharge of hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and methane gases that create what we call flatus or gas in the colon. If you have excessive flatus, this is called flatulence. And each day, up to about 1,500 mLs of flatus is produced in the colon. So about 1,500 mLs of gases, of farts, are produced in your colon. More is going to be produced when you eat foods such as beans, which are rich in otherwise indigestible sugars and complex carbohydrates like soluble dietary fiber. Now, in general, diet, health, and stress will determine the frequency of bowel movements, and the number of bowel movements will vary greatly between individuals, ranging from 2 to 3 per day to 3 to 4 per week. But of course, there are certain foods that you should eat if you want to increase the number of bowel movements that you have. Foods that are rich in fiber, together with plenty of water, will definitely increase the number of bowel movements you have per day or per week. It is true that this might create more gases, but on the other hand, you're able to get rid of the waste products more efficiently.